Our goals for this chapter describe how sensory impairments have been defined and classified, and changes in the identification and treatment of children with hearing impairments. Explain the impact of hearing impairments on the development of language and factors that influence the development of language in children with hearing loss. Describe the educational performance of students with hearing impairments and compare the advantages and disadvantages of various intervention techniques for children with hearing impairment. And then that last part, bringing in vision, describe the language characteristics associated with visual impairments and the implications for teaching students with vision loss. Key terms, hopefully you will, if you are unfamiliar with any of these, by the time we're done today and you're done reading your chapter, you'll have at least read or heard their definition. So first, we're going to just define a hearing impairment. We have these terms: hearing impairment, deaf, hard of hearing. They're sometimes used, interchangeably, but they're not technically interchangeable. So a hearing impairment, is a broad term describing a hearing disability that ranges from mild to profound. And it's like the umbrella term that includes deaf and hard of hearing. So if you are deaf, that's your hearing impairment. If you are hard of hearing, that's your hearing impairment. So hearing impairment in and of itself is very broad. Then we get into deaf, and that is one whose hearing disability precludes successful processing. In other words, they can't hear no matter if they're using any kind of hearing aid or not. They're profoundly deaf. And then hard of hearing is kind of all the rest, and there's still a broad spectrum, but it's one who has some residual hearing that's sufficient enough for some kind of successful processing of linguistic information, some kind of hearing. Often, if they're hard of hearing in this category, they will have a hearing aid, but it's just saying they have a large hearing deficit, but they can hear with some accuracy with a hearing aid, or sometimes even without, if you're talking about like a mild hearing impairment. Types of hearing loss. We have three main types when you're talking about if you were to go to an audiologist and they were to test your hearing. They're going to look at your type of hearing loss, and by looking at different factors, they're going to decide whether it's a conductive hearing loss, a sensorineural hearing loss, or a central hearing loss. Here's the figure. This is in your book, but a conductive hearing loss starts from your outer ear, so the actual ear flap, it's called your pinna, that you can touch and you draw on the side of your head, that ear, toward your middle ear. I think most of the time, until you really study it, you don't really think much about the part of your ear that you can see. But even though there's some mixed opinions on this, that outer ear does very little, if anything at all, to actually help you hear. Some scientists believe it helps you localize sound, but others don't think it has anything to do with it at all. So anyway, the conductive hearing loss would be a hearing loss that was caused by a difference in the outer to middle ear. So the outer to middle ear covers the part of your ear you can see to your eardrum. And that's called your tympanic membrane, but we all know eardrum. And then there's those three little bones that are often called, they have some other names, I'm trying to think, hammer and stirrup. They have these nicknames, but I don't even know their nicknames anymore. Their technical names are malleus, incus, and stapes. Those three bones of your middle ear are small enough to all fit on a dime and still have plenty of room left over, so they're incredibly tiny. A conductive hearing loss would be that ear canal to your eardrum to those three middle bones in the inner ear that then go to your inner ear, so outer ear, middle ear. If it's a sensorineural hearing loss, that's your inner ear, where it starts with that kind of snail octopus looking purple thing. The part that's round that looks like a snail is your cochlea. It holds all the little tiny hair cells that help you hear when they vibrate. And then those kind of loops are called your semicircular canals. They do a lot to help with balance. And then you can see there's a nerve that's integrating the cochlea and that inner ear. And if somebody has a sensorineural uh, hearing loss, it's usually have some kind of difficulty transmitting that vibration, the sound from the ear to the auditory nerve. There's some kind of damage or chromosomal difference that even if you can, your ear can do its job to send the vibrations through. Something happens along the auditory nerve where it never reaches your brain. And then a central type of hearing loss would just be a direct difference at birth or injury to the brain in regards to hearing, and that's why you can't hear. I have included this hearing loss simulation in the playlist, and I really encourage you to listen to it. It's pretty interesting, and I think I want you just to be thinking when it's done, um, which simulation was the biggest surprise to you? Because it's going to start with normal hearing, and then don't turn down your computer because it's going to show you what that same song would sound like if you had a mild hearing loss, a moderate hearing loss, or a severe hearing loss. And so this is very simplistic, but just the idea of they took certain frequencies out because that's how hearing loss works. And so watch this and come back for more afterward.